a standard kind of thing that police are looking for in situations like this. They have to make sure that a giant crime scene is clear before they can declare that the threat in this situation is over. So he had mentioned, there are rumors going around, which we don't want to share any of those rumors just because none of them are really confirmed. So I think they're just trying to be extra cautious and make sure that there is not a threat inside the King Soopers.
Okay, Steve, we appreciate the update, and we thank Stephen for his story, and we're glad his granddaughters are okay.
Oh my God. It has pockets. Small butt, big butt, round butt, apple butt, flat butt, bubble butt, any kind of butt, say what? What? All I need now when I work out. Check out my butt, butt. 24.
Our Liz Kodelik is joining us now, and Liz has also had a chance to speak with some people at this scene. Liz, what are you hearing?
Well, I mean, we all have questions about what's going on here, but a lot of the people who are standing on this sidewalk right across the street from the King Soopers are waiting for more information about whether or not their loved ones were affected by this. I talked to a group of college kids who were concerned. They came here, rushed here when they heard about all of this because they have a friend who works at this King Soopers. Thankfully, they were able to get on the phone with him and they found out he was okay. But then I just spoke with a man named Dan Winters. He doesn't have a cell phone, neither does his wife. And he hasn't heard from her, and he is concerned that she was in here. And I just want you to hear his account of as he stands here looking at this huge scene, wondering where his wife is. Take a listen.
Been involved in Iraq 3 times, and so it's unusual to see 9,000 police cars, though. That is quite unusual. And I'm sure, the odds are overwhelming because she's fine, but that really isn't good enough.
Can you imagine? It's just a tough scene, and especially for those people who have such important questions that they need to get answered. Is my loved one affected by this? So Dan did tell me that he had somebody who came up to him and said that they were a victim advocate, and he's trying to find out if there's some place for people like him to go. We did see him walk in this direction, so I hope that he got that answer. We haven't had time to check for him, although that is certainly something that we want to know too. But he's still in limbo right now, and a lot of other people I'm sure are as well. But especially, can you imagine you guys not having a cell phone to be able to call your wife, your husband, your friend, and ask, were you involved with this? So we're all just waiting for answers, and some people, those answers are extremely, extremely important.
Our hopes, best hopes and wishes for Dan and his wife, that they do get connected and she's okay. Thanks, Liz.
Homeowners, this incredible tip is just for you. If you owe less than $331,700
world that these men and women who are out here right now are going to get to the bottom of what happened here, which of course is something we still don't know. Earlier, there was a ton of people who were on this sidewalk here watching this scene that you're seeing right now, and also wondering if their loved ones, their friends, their family members were inside of that King Soopers. So we actually even talked to somebody a few minutes ago who owns the Sweet Cream Creamery, the ice cream shop that's in here as well. And his employees still don't know if it's safe for them to come out. So they're still inside of his ice cream shop waiting for word. Here was part of our conversation.
I've been in touch with them on the phone several times, and they're doing okay. They're just scared and want to, be able to come out. Still, the police haven't given us any definitive information about how secure the area is and whether or not our employees can come out.
So he's still waiting for information. We also talked to a man a little bit earlier who was waiting to find out if his wife was inside of that King Soopers. He doesn't have a cell phone. His wife doesn't have a cell phone. Chief Payson did tell me, though, for people like him and a few other people who we were actually talking to here, Kyle, just looking for, one woman was looking for her daughter, trying to find out if she was inside there. For anybody who has a loved one who may have been in there, a friend, anybody who they might be looking for, you said that you saw people who were going into buses. Those people were taken to the CU Event Center, and that's where the reunification is happening. So for anybody out here who's watching who might need to find somebody, that's where you're being told to go at this point, Kyle. But so many people with the question of what's going on, is the scene clear, are we safe, is everybody in custody who is involved with this? And hopefully we'll be able to find that out here in a few minutes when we get that update from the Boulder Police Department.
All right. Liz, thank you very much. Appreciate that update as well. Sorry about that. Just slipping in the snow. So here at the King Soopers, as we mentioned a little while ago, things are quieter than they typically would be on a normal Monday afternoon, evening, when you would expect to have shoppers coming in to grab this and that. All you have are law enforcement officers inside the building, sitting in cars outside, and there's no coming and going. There's no traffic noise on the nearby streets because all of that is shut down for the purposes of the investigation, as well as allowing law enforcement movement in and out of the neighborhood. And that, combined with the weather here today in Boulder, where they're sucked in under a low cloud ceiling, you can't even see the tops of the foothills. It's just a very kind of eerie quiet here while the work of the investigation goes about inside the store. Most of the neighbors that had come out to kind of get a look at things have since departed. There are a few folks around. Some of them had conversations with our Steve Steger earlier that they were inside the store when it happened. It seems like they want to stick around to either get a vehicle or perhaps to get some kind of information from folks. Boulder police are expected to speak to the community at 6 o'clock. At 6 o'clock will be their first public briefing. One thing that they did state on social media within the last half hour is that there is incorrect information that's floating around on social media. There's been a lot floating around today. I think we heard Kim and Tom talk about that earlier today. There was some pretty ugly behavior in terms of folks who were offering information about what happened here early, just not very humane type stuff. So I don't know if that's what they're referring to, but some of that quickly gained traction because as it happens now, each time America grapples with its latest shooting incident like this in a public place, people are hungry for information. There's the frantic and emotional search for information among some of the people that I've run into here who came down looking for information about loved ones, but then there's also just kind of that general interest both from around Colorado and around the country. And what was feeding that interest very early on today was some kind of ugly stuff. So we'll wait to see what they have for us here in about 5 minutes and see if all the information the Boulder PD provides comports with what we have seen here. And one thing that we have yet to get any inkling of through official or unofficial channels is how this ended. Boulder police were very clear that when they arrived here on scene that the threat was ongoing, and we could see that in the early pictures when they had the folks up on the roof and they had the SWAT teams massed behind their vehicles for protection, preparing to enter the store and so forth. It was very clear early on that it was the belief, if not the knowledge of law enforcement, that the threat was ongoing. And it's been clear for some time now here that the threat at this place is now over. Last check, Boulder police had not publicly said that they have lifted the order for people at 17th and Grove north of here to stay in their homes, shelter in place being the law enforcement term. Just they want people away from their doors and windows while they dealt with the report of somebody who was armed and potentially dangerous. They said at that point that they were investigating whether that person was related to the situation here at the King Soopers at Broadway and Table Mesa. But obviously in a community that is shaken and on high alert today, I imagine that order asking people to stay inside and stay away from their doors and windows probably would have been followed to the letter if perhaps it wouldn't be on another day. So in a few minutes here, Boulder Police will have their opportunity to talk to the community about what happened here today, and about what all of us who have been on scene and just seen with our own eyes expect to be an announcement that that there were lives lost here today at the King Soopers. And we hope to gain information and understanding about how this incident was brought to a conclusion. And I believe at last report, we visibly saw one person taken to the hospital, to Boulder Community Health, to BCH, where our Noah Brennan was earlier today. But this was not a situation, as we've seen, sadly, too many of these shooting incidents where there's a line of ambulances that comes racing out, or even a handful. Based on what our folks observed from while they were here, it was one. Singular. In the last few minutes here, we're expecting Boulder Police to speak any moment now. I want to bring my colleague Steve Stager back into the conversation. And Steve, you had an opportunity to talk to some of the folks who gathered right at the police tape on the far side of the parking lot. Even 30, 45 minutes ago, there was a group of about a dozen people who were just standing and watching and waiting, and they were there because of their proximity to the shooting.
Yeah, there was a mix of people here. There were people from the neighborhood who were just curious, but there were also people who were inside the building when this happened. I talked to one employee who worked in the deli who said he was just kind of at work, heard a bang, didn't think much of it at first until he started seeing people hit the deck. And as soon as he saw that, he started to run and actually hid inside one area when he heard the voice of his manager on the other side of the door saying, "Get out, get out, get out." And he and his manager were able to get out of the parking lot. And he told me he got out before the first officers were arriving on scene. He saw them as they were arriving. Another employee told me that he was coming outside for a break out of the west doors here. There are two entrance doors there to the King Soopers. Mm-hmm. He says that as he was walking out, he saw someone out of the corner of his eye and his peripheral vision walk in, and then he saw a flash and heard a bang. And then he says he saw another flash and didn't hear a blast associated with that, and he just started running immediately. But he said he saw that person raise their arms. Now he puts together what was in his arms at the time. Just a mix of stories out here from people who've been inside. I heard from a grandfather who his grandchildren, two granddaughters, 12 and 13, were here with their dad to get a COVID vaccine. That he told me that they witnessed someone shot inside, which you got to think about the trauma that is going to bring to those kids for the rest of their lives, witnessing something like this. They ran upstairs, they got above the pharmacy, they hid in an area for a while until they say police actually came through the roof and got them out, were able to get them out. And the grandfather told me quite candidly that they helped those two grandchildren avoid some sights that they wouldn't want to see on their way out of the building, which was just striking. It's just a mix of stories of people who were inside that building. And it's traumatic. It's absolutely traumatic.
And you think about the ripple effect of what happened here today, as we've seen in so many other Colorado communities, and the fact that you have the people who were here today, all of the people whose first thought and first thing they told us today was, "That's my store. Those are my people. I know those customers. I know those clerks. Like, that's where I go." So now they will grapple with the fact that somebody came and did violence at a place that they love, that's in the heart of their community. You've got all the folks who had passed through here, once or twice or whatever, and now that's going to be what's associated with them in their minds. And even before we learn the cost of what happened today in terms of injuries and loss of life in a public place like this, that thousands, tens of thousands of people easily in the community have some tie to, that's always going to be part of the history of this place. If it's not, ingrained in them because they witnessed what happened here today. Steve, I appreciate your perspective on this and the folks that you talked to in the first early hours out here. Any moment now, we expect Boulder Police to speak to the community for the first time about the shooting here at the King Soopers at Broadway and Table Mesa on the south side of town, down near down south of the university campus. And based on our own observations and the observations of folks who are here on the scene, it's pretty clear that folks lost their lives here today. And what we're waiting to hear from police is in terms of the number of folks lost, the number of folks injured, and then what happened with the suspect, described as a male suspect by witnesses here, and whether the suspect was, in fact, the person that we watched earlier on in the day being brought out. This was somebody who was not dressed for a trip to the grocery store, not wearing a whole lot of clothes, which is not an atypical situation when police are quickly ascertaining if somebody has threats on them. And we saw that person come out, appeared to have some kind of lower body injury, visible blood, and the person was kind of, hustled out, hands behind his back by police. But nothing from them at this point about whether that is the person that they believe perpetrated this. But it's clear that the act of violence, the shooting, happened immediately outside of the store and then right inside one of those two flanking front doors on either side of the Starbucks sign. They see all the windows smashed out, and that's one of those things where, was that gunfire? Was that somebody, tossing a chair through a window to get out? What was that? Was that police trying to gain entry? We didn't see them try to gain entry that way, but somehow the front windows in the store ended up getting smashed out in the process. And then you still have that area kind of back by the store entrance where time has stood still, where the folks who were parked right outside, their vehicles remain there, vehicles that were searched by law enforcement to see whether they contained any kind of threat. And then obviously law enforcement would work to ascertain which of any of the vehicles belonged to their suspect. And so just kind of frozen in time there, right outside of the store, and there's the one law enforcement tactical vehicle that's just kind of almost up on the sidewalk. I believe that vehicle is blocking our view from this vantage point of what appeared to be a civilian vehicle that was kind of up on the sidewalk in front of the store. And that was kind of an unusual situation, at least when we saw our first pictures of what was happening here. In addition to, the smashed out glass and so forth, it was, well, why is that beige car up on the sidewalk in front of the store? And now you've got the law enforcement tactical vehicle right up in front of that. We believe that witnesses were taken from the building, some of them not right away. It appears that it took some time to get witnesses out of the building and into waiting buses on Broadway at Table Mesa. Presumably in these situations, as we've seen before, they'll be taken to a nearby place. In the past, we've seen it not only be police stations, but also, fire stations or schools or someplace where they have the ability to safely have a number of people wait for their opportunity to talk to investigators about what they saw and heard. There are at least 2 law enforcement officers that are still on the roof of the building. There's one in the rear of the building. There's another in the front of the building. Obviously, we're not dealing with a live tactical situation at this point, so there's not a danger in pointing that out. Everybody is kind of at ease around the building. 6:30. Thank you, Steve. Boulder police are now saying 6:30 is when they will brief the public for the first time about the shooting at the King Soopers at Broadway and Table Mesa. Our Mark Salinger, along with photojournalist Taylor Schuss, were the first of our 9 news teams to arrive here today, and they watched folks being brought out of the building and consoled in the first moments after they escaped that traumatic situation. Mark, from your vantage point, what have you seen since then?
Yeah, Kyle, right now to set the scene for you, we are awaiting the press conference, which was supposed to start at 5:45, and now it's pushed back to 6:30, understandably. The police officers and everybody investigating all of this are having to do a tremendous amount of work right now and want to make sure that the information that they're putting out there is accurate. From what we saw earlier, we were right outside the King Soopers parking lot for several hours right after it happened. We got there probably 45 minutes to an hour after it happened, and we got there in time to see SWAT officers, dozens of SWAT officers from all across the Denver metro area and Front Range running inside to the parking lot of the King Soopers. We saw giant Bearcat trucks going through the parking lot. And then we saw a group of people who were presumably inside the store come out and be led by police officers to some ambulances where they were given blankets and started talking to police officers who were taking notes. And you could see the emotion on their faces. You could see people crying. You can see people hugging each other. And at that point, it really hits home just what happened today, and people going to a grocery store to do their shopping, and something like this happens. So again, Kyle, we're still waiting to hear exactly what happened, exactly what's transpired, but the scenes of sadness, of fear, and of pure chaos are the scenes that I'll remember from this day.
Rachel told me that the cat escorted all the way.
All right, Mark, thank you very much. Appreciate your perspective and appreciate your work along with our fellow journalist Taylor Schuss earlier today. I want to turn again to my colleague Kim Christensen, who's been on the air since mid-afternoon when we first learned about the shooting in Boulder, city she's very familiar with. Kim, one of the first immediate effects of this is a change for CU Boulder staff and students tomorrow.
That's correct. The university put out a message a short time ago saying all classes after 5:30 are canceled for today, for sure. They do still have some in-person classes at CU Boulder. There is no spring break this year, if you will. They call them wellness days that they're getting at the end of this week. So there are students on campus and all over. And as you know, this King Soopers is not far from the campus. The secondary location might be even a little bit closer to the campus. Many students live in the housing around there, and they're telling them to stay in place right now, even though it may have resolved a bit. Another thing that maybe people are confused about earlier is Boulder Valley Schools is on spring break this week. So when we've talked about Fairview High School and Boulder High School, and then recently another tweet went out regarding Boulder High School saying everyone is safe. They further explained that they have sports that are practices that are happening right now. And so they sent out the messages that coaches are staying with students that are still in practices right now for these spring sports that they're finally getting to hold this year. They didn't get to last year. But this is one of the things that's happening in the schools in the area. For Boulder High School, at least we know the students are there with their coaches, probably a much smaller group of folks, but they are staying there at the university. So we've mentioned this again and again. This is a community, and this is the university and the people that live around, and a lot of people worried about their loved ones and wondering where they are, what they're doing. First thing I did was text my son, tell him to get home and stay there.
Yep. I think, I think there are a whole lot of folks who did something very similar today, I mean, out-of-state family texted this afternoon just to go, everybody good, because, Boulder might as well be next door, to somebody who lives out of state for somebody who lives in Denver, so everybody just wants to check in on their loved ones, and came by here today and just happened to run into somebody that I know who's looking for somebody at the store. Imagine a lot of people went through the same thing today, especially if they heard that this happened in their part of Boulder and were not immediately able to raise a family member that they thought might be nearby. We were originally expecting a 5:45 briefing from Boulder Police. It will be the first time that they speak publicly about what happened here today. That briefing has now been pushed to 6:30, so 19 minutes from now is when we expect Boulder Police to step before the TV cameras and so on and so forth. We'll obviously stick with that here. That's typically when next would be going off the air, but we'll stick with it so that you're able to hear directly from Boulder Police about what happened here today. Our Marshal Zellinger has been gathering information as well in terms of the way that law enforcement responds to the kind of call that they received today, that of a shooter, an active threat inside a crowded public place, supermarket. Marshal?
Kyle, when we cover active shootings, there's usually a scene that sticks out. And we've been talking about those broken windows in front of that King Soopers between those two entrances. I was speaking with a former Jefferson County Sheriff's Office SWAT team member from 2002 and 2011 is when he worked for Jeffco. He now operates something called TAC 1 Consulting in the Denver metro area and trains both law enforcement and students on active shooter situations. And you're seeing that video there of those bashed out windows. And there's a Bearcat from a SWAT team in front of it. If indeed, which we believe that the Bearcat possibly did that from the outside. The question I asked Joe Deedon is, why would you spend time breaking windows like that in an active shooter situation?
A few different things. It could be a distraction to try to elicit a response. You know, and obviously they're using that vehicle as cover. You know, it's obviously going to stop, you know, any type of weapon that person has on them. It can be used to get better eyeballs or better view in there without the glass, the reflections, get it out of the way so they can see in there better.
One of the things he taught me through the training that he does is if you don't know what's going on inside anymore, you likely have to change your approach. And if you know that someone that you suspect is a shooter is inside and you no longer hear, or you're not hearing anyone from inside or 911 calls, and you need to try to generate something, that's one tactic. Another question I asked him is, why did we see a lot of visuals of officers and SWAT team members on the outside instead of the training that we're used to hearing where you just run inside after the threat? Here's what he said about why we might have seen that.
In an active shooter situation, it's going tactical because again, the lull in the action, we haven't heard anything. We haven't seen anything to where we need to rush into a certain area. You know, that loss of life or that violent behavior has stopped, or we think we're 99% sure it has stopped for whatever reason. So we're taking more of a tactical approach.
He defended the actions that you would see in any active shooting, that you have patrol officers who are getting that first call, and you likely have 3 or 4 that are there and running inside to find out what's happening. And then as you get more information and you get the SWAT team called in and get that Bearcat out there, then things will evolve and change over time as you're getting new information or not getting information from inside the location. Kyle, one thing we talked about with him, we're used to hearing active shooters, sadly, in schools, and now you have a big box store, a grocery store. You know, we've talked about schools and movie theaters. In Colorado, we don't have that experience of a grocery store or a big box store active shooter situation. And as you said, when I go shopping, I don't think, gee, where's my second escape besides that front door? And there are a lot of places inside of a big box store where you have to look and search and not know, do we have a customer, someone who's injured, or do we have a shooter or multiple shooters inside? And this creates all new avenues that no matter the training that you get, like he trains law enforcement, until you get into that situation, there are things that you might not have realized you need to consider, such as how big that store is and where are other places people can hide, Kyle.
Yeah, hearing you talk about that, Marshall, I think back to what Steve Steger was telling us earlier, some of his off-camera conversations with store employees and what they did. And it's pretty clear that some store employees likely saved lives today because they had the knowledge about where to go and where to get other people to in order to be safe. You know, and it takes me back to hearing security experts talk previously after some of America's other shootings about that situational awareness in the places that we frequent, about, you know, these places have got to have fire exits. You know, those signs, those doors are marked. You know, everybody knows the front door of the grocery store, the one you go in and out of. But having that situational awareness of maybe where is another exit, and unlike a situation, perhaps like a school or a workplace or a church, you know, you could drop me in the middle of the grocery store that I usually go to, and I couldn't tell you where the other doors are. You know, so maybe just something to think about. You know, you'll hear the security experts talk about it, and it's easy to kind of shrug off as, you know, oh well, but you never know. How long does it take to look and see? So just a very calm situation now here as we approach almost 4 hours since the initial calls came in of an active shooter at the King Soopers at Table Mesa and Broadway on the south side of Boulder. Overwhelming police presence from across the greater metro area descended on this scene. Numerous SWAT teams and so forth. Law enforcement was still flying a drone over the location about 60 minutes ago. That drone was up very early on. They used, cherry picker type apparatus to get some folks up on the roof where they were during the active and threatening portion of this situation and still remain now, keeping an eye on things. And you heard the family that talked to Steve Steger earlier talk about kids inside being rescued out the roof. Let's listen to some of what that grandfather had to say.
My two granddaughters, at 13 and 14, basically came in with their dad so he could get a COVID shot. They came in through the east door where the pharmacy is, and that's where it all started. And there was shooting, and he saw it and got the girls down. They ran and hid upstairs in a coat closet for an hour in the coats, and then they were communicating with my daughter through his phone, texting, and then the cops came in through the roof and were protecting them. They're out now, out the back. They got out, and this is going to be pretty hard for them to live with, I think.
Oh my God! When you hear
It's a conversation between our Steve Steger and a gentleman whose family was in the store coming here for COVID shots. That, of course, now is the role that supermarkets, pharmacy workers have taken on, in addition to all of their normal work, is that they are now dispensing vaccines and hope to hundreds of thousands of our neighbors around the state. So you had families like that one that came here today full of anticipation and joy. I mean, I think everybody's seen the pictures and heard the stories about, audible expressions of joy at these vaccine clinics, and that's something that the workers at this supermarket got to participate in every day. That's what they got to be a part of that after working their way through the entire pandemic as essential workers, as people who came to work every day and oftentimes put themselves in some harm's way so that the rest of us might just be able to go about life and be able to come down and get food for our families. But that is what was disrupted, in addition to everything else today, is that you had folks coming here for that moment that they waited for so long to get the shot. And that's in addition to everything else, what was attacked here today. Boulder police have still not communicated with the public in terms of any resolution to the situation at 17th and Grove. That's the area north of here where they put out an alert telling people to stay inside, to stay away from their doors and windows, so that they could investigate a report of a suspicious individual. Chris, you want to take a look at something? Yeah, I think photojournalist Chris Hansen wants to take a closer look at something in the background here. Oh, we've got some folks headed in, it looks like. And I think before they popped behind the vehicles, it looked like they were wearing the protective coverings on their shoes that you'll see crime scene investigators wear. It looks like everybody there has those blue shoe covers on. Our Steve Steger's been here for hours and was just remarking a little while ago that it had been hours since he had seen anyone enter the store through the front door. Obviously, law enforcement has control of this entire complex, so they have other ways to get in and out of the building. But we have not seen anybody go in and out of the front of the store, and not clear if they're going to now or whether they are going to start some of their work outside the store. We've slid over to this location here because it gives you a vantage point on the doorway, but in honesty, also obscures some of the tougher to see things outside of the store, which unless you were really scouring the background, you might not even realize we're there. But we believe that where we are now presents you with a look at what's happening, and some folks coming out of the store now, it would appear as well, some law enforcement. You actually have a much better view of this than I do because yours is through a telephoto lens and mine is not. But you see that conference of folks outside the front of the store. Elsewhere in the lot, there are probably about a dozen law enforcement officers, and it appears to be some medical personnel who are just standing around chatting and talking. Even within the last hour, they have moved out some law enforcement vehicles, some heavier vehicles, and they've moved out personnel as well. And there goes that team inside the King Soopers at Table Mesa and Broadway. This again is the first time that we have seen investigators enter the front of the store. That is the area where the shooting happened. It was right inside and outside of the front of the store. We're less than 10 minutes away from a scheduled briefing from Boulder Police. This will be the first time that they speak to the public about what happened here today. They made a point of saying on social media, when announcing this briefing, that there had been misinformation or incorrect information floating around on social media. It's not all that difficult to discern what some of that might be. There were some folks very early on making pronouncements and putting some pretty ugly images on social media, and Boulder Police certainly could be talking about that. To kind of take you behind the scenes, we're confident that what we've told you here today is accurate simply because law enforcement's very good about reaching out and just saying, hey, listen, somebody gave you this information. That's not true. Can you hold off or at least cite your source or whatever else? Sadly, going through a number of these shooting incidents like this, they know quickly, at least when it comes to mass media, how to get in touch to just simply say, you got some bad information floating around. We've got somebody, it appears to be a law enforcement officer, who's taking some pictures around vehicles there toward the center of the parking lot near that white service van. But I want to talk to Noel Brennan. He's with our Brian Wendland, and well, maybe we don't have Noel after all. We'll wait and talk to Noel in just a little bit. I'm interested in his perspective because he was up closer to 17th and Grove. 17th and Grove, where Boulder Police told folks to stay inside while they checked out a report of somebody who might be dangerous. They have not publicly issued an all clear, but I guess it's quite possible that they told folks there in the neighborhood if the situation was resolved. Noel, what have you seen and heard?
Hey Kyle, sorry, we're just dealing with some mic issues out here, so I hope you can hear me, but we are right here at 17th and Canyon, 17th right between Grove and Canyon, and just in the past couple minutes, Boulder Police and the Boulder County Sheriff's Office just left here. If you were at this scene just a couple minutes ago, you would have seen police tape that was crisscrossing all the way across the intersection here. There were several SWAT vehicles, and this all started about 5 o'clock. There were about 4 SWAT vehicles that pulled up to an apartment building behind us. Then we saw that tweet from Boulder Police saying that they were looking to see about a potentially armed suspect inside of an apartment building. If this was connected at all to the shooting, they were investigating that. We saw SWAT officers come out with their rifles drawn. They were appearing to be talking to someone that was inside that apartment building. Just the past 5-10 minutes or so, everything started to wind down. The officers, their demeanor certainly didn't look as tense as it was when this all started about 5 o'clock. And they quickly packed up everything in the past couple of minutes, drove away in those SWAT vehicles, and they took down the police tape. And now 17th is quiet once again, and it is open to traffic. So Kyle, we have not heard from Boulder Police how this may have been connected, or if it is connected to the shooting that happened, or if they were able to get anyone outside of that apartment building. Those are all questions that we have. This all wrapped up in the past couple minutes, so we're going to work to get you those answers.
Appreciate it, Noel. It certainly seems like that's good news there from your location at 17th and Grove. Here in the parking lot outside the King Soopers, where the shooting happened this afternoon, we see new interest in 1 or 2 vehicles in the parking lot. In that you have a police officer. If you could zoom out just a touch, Chris. We've got somebody who appears to be a member of law enforcement who's taking a series of photos of both that white work van as well as it would appear the black car next to it with the driver's door open on the white work van. That's a level of scrutiny on any one vehicle that we have not seen in the last couple of hours since they walked around and did their initial sweep of vehicles to see if there was a danger. But clearly there is a special interest in that vehicle right there. My colleague Tom Green back at the station actually just flagged me on the fact that we have a Chris, no tight on the van, please. Okay. Tom just flagged us on the fact that the White House has been made aware of the shooting here today in Boulder, Colorado. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki tweeting at 6:19 our time that President Biden has been briefed on the shooting in Colorado. She continues, he will be kept up to date by his team as there are additional developments. So the situation here has now gotten the attention of the country clear up to and including the President of the United States. We are expecting a report from Boulder Police to the community, to members of the media, in just a few minutes at 6:30. You see somebody coming back in, Steve?
I just see the SWAT vehicle.
It looks like they're moving a SWAT vehicle back in that our Steve Stager can see from his perspective. Oh, there, I see it now. Okay, that's out on Table Mesa. For folks who know this area well, we are standing roughly at the corner of Table Mesa and Gillespie. We are on the northwest side of the King Soopers parking lot. And not clear at this point whether they're just using that vehicle to move people as well as move the vehicle out of here. But our Chris Hansen will give us a look. Seems like they're moving those folks out. There's been a bit of that just kind of wrangling here around the area as we've seen. You've got what I believe are CU Transit Police. You've got Arvada Police, Denver Police, so on and so forth, just kind of queued up and waiting, it would appear, for they're all clear to leave. Steve, they took that vehicle eastbound on Table Mesa. I didn't see them bring it into the lot. Yeah, I don't think they took it into the lot. I think they just took the vehicle eastbound on Table Mesa. So the only things that have changed here in the last few minutes is that for the first time in hours, we saw investigators walk in the front door of the King Soopers where the shooting happened this afternoon. That was at about 6:20. There was a group of about a half dozen investigators. You could tell they had the crime scene kind of like the paper boots on over their shoes, and walked in together as a unit. Very, very calm posture. Nobody was geared up or anything else. They had a conversation with some other law enforcement at the door. Then they walked in together. By all accounts, the act of danger passed hours ago here. And one of the things that we expect Boulder Police to address for the community at 6:30 when they speak publicly for the first time is the situation with the suspect, described as a male shooter by witnesses. And earlier today we did see that one man who was brought outside. He had his shirt taken off and perhaps a layer of pants taken off as well. We wondered, just having seen similar things in other situations, if perhaps he had just been really thoroughly searched by police to make sure that he was not a threat. He was bleeding. It appeared to be from the waist down somewhere, and was taken in an ambulance. The one person taken away from this scene in an ambulance, taken to Boulder Community Health here in the area. My colleagues have done checks around to the other hospitals, and they had not received, nor were they expecting, any other patients. I want to talk to Mark Salinger again, who was here early on this afternoon. He's over on the other side of the complex from where I am, where they brought some folks out. And Mark, you've got the situation there where there were folks who were consoling each other and were being consoled, and those were the folks who were eyewitnesses to what happened today. It appears that we may not have Mark, that's fine. We're going to hear from Boulder Police any moment now, and 6:30 was the time that they were expecting to talk to members of the public. 5:45 was the original time, but not unusual for these things to be pushed back as they want to gather enough information to present full enough accounting early on of what happened here today. But obvious to anybody who's here at the scene and able to just look with bare eyes that there were lives lost here today. And now it's a matter of police coming out to tell us what they believe happened, how this situation was brought to a resolution. That's another thing that even for those people who were here on scene as it was happening, it was not immediately clear, because it transpired inside the store, how things were brought to a safe conclusion. But by the time that happened, you had an enormous police presence outside the store, you had law enforcement on top of the building, and then you had this entire area here at Table Mesa and Broadway ringed in law enforcement as well. My colleague Mark Salinger had a perspective on this from the other side, where some of the folks were brought out of the store. Mark?
Yeah, Kyle, going back to around 4 o'clock this afternoon, we saw a group of police officers that brought out a dozen or so people who looked to be people who perhaps were inside the store. Some of them had name tags that you could see, I believe, probably from King Soopers, and others were hugging each other. They were given blankets by police officers, but you could see the tears in their eyes, and you could see the gravity of the situation and what they had just witnessed. And police were speaking with them and taking notes, but immediately you could see just how difficult what they had just experienced was. And from there, we saw police officers in SWAT uniforms. We saw large Bearcats going in and out of the parking lot. At one point, there was a large contingency of SWAT officers that were running inside. And I want to make sure, we're waiting for the press conference right now that is supposed to start any minute, and I want to make sure that we aren't missing anything. They said that they are driving right now on their way here. So this press conference, again, Kyle, was supposed to start at 5:45. It's now been delayed till 6:30, and we've just been told now by the public information officer here, who's working to help us learn more information, that they're on their way now. So it should happen any minute, Kyle. And some of the things that we're hoping to learn is obviously just how bad this situation is, how many people have died, how many people have lost their lives, and like you've been talking about, Kyle, how this all ended and also how it started, Kyle.
Sure. All right. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate your work today. Just received a note from the labor union that represents some of the store employees here today, UFCW Local 7. Just sent us a note saying that they're obviously monitoring the situation here at this store, and adding, we are praying that all the grocery workers and shoppers today, including our 32 members that work at this store, are safe and unharmed. It's been quite a year for the union employees of UFCW Local 7. Not only have they been working the grocery stores as essential workers throughout the pandemic, UFCW Local 7 also represents meatpacking employees in northern Colorado, including in Greeley, where they had some pretty serious outbreaks. So that workforce that's been critical to keeping Colorado fed and keeping Colorado safe over the last year. Those folks have had a lot asked of them over the last year, including the 32 UFCW Local 7 workers here at this store. A note in from King Soopers about the shooting today. King Soopers representative offers, we are horrified and deeply saddened by the senseless violence that occurred at our King Soopers store. The entire King Soopers family, they write, offers our thoughts, prayers, and support to our associates, customers, and first responders who so bravely responded to this tragic situation. We'll continue to cooperate with law enforcement, they mention that, and then refer future inquiries to Boulder Police, who again, any moment now, we expect to speak publicly for the first time. Boulder Police saying that they believe that there is misinformation floating around out there on social media, and that's something that that we saw pretty early on in the day's events, just in terms of people broadcasting and sharing some pretty graphic images, and then drawing conclusions based on that, and it was not a good situation. But at this point, we know that one person was taken from here in an ambulance, and it was the only person that we saw taken out of the store in any kind of situation that could appear as if they were in police custody. I mean, police walked some people out, but there was a difference in terms of the way that this one person was hustled out of the store. So we'll wait to hear what Boulder Police have to say about that. If you're just rejoining us, or perhaps you're listening in for the first time, the secondary situation in Boulder no longer appears to be a threat if it was a threat to begin with. That's the situation north of here at 17th and Grove. shortly after the situation here at the supermarket, the shooting, appeared to be neutralized in the sense that there was no continuing ongoing threat to the public. Boulder police told people in that area of 17th and Grove that they need to stay inside their homes and businesses, stay away from the doors and windows and so forth, because there was a report of an armed and dangerous person. And Boulder police, perhaps knowing that just that's where people's minds were going to go today, said that they were trying to figure out if that situation was connected to this one. Our Noel Brennan up in that neighborhood says that the police posture up there has been relaxed. They've cleared out. So it appears if there ever was a threat there beyond just a report, we don't even know if there was a situation, there was a report of a situation. If there was a threat up there, it is no longer an issue for the community. And likewise, here at the King Soopers at Table Mesa and Broadway, we have police very relaxed posture for the last couple of hours as the situation is now in hand and the investigation inside and outside of the store is starting. We know from witnesses and from what we can observe here ourselves that the shooting happened both inside and outside of the store, just inside one of those two entrances that are relatively close together. They kind of flank the area with the Starbucks sign where the windows are smashed out, and then right inside. And then we have also seen renewed interest in the last 15 to 20 minutes in a vehicle in the parking lot. This is an interesting situation, if only because police swept the parking lot. They went through the parking lot as they tend to do in the course of these investigations to try and make sure that there were no additional threats out there. So either the situation that has drawn their interest with the white van is something that they identified in that initial sweep but did not need to deal with immediately, or there was some kind of secondary discovery or information that led them back to that vehicle for a second look and a detailed workover by investigators, although it does not appear that anybody is out there now at that point. It's interesting to see the sheer number of law enforcement that remains here in the area, despite the fact that the situation appears to be in hand. But I imagine that that is at the discretion of Boulder PD. They're the ones who call for help, and they'll tell folks when help is no longer needed. Any moment now, Boulder police are expected to speak to the public for the first time since today's shooting. My colleague Steve Steger was here earlier today, had the opportunity to speak with some store employees about what they saw, as well as the family, the grandfather and father of somebody who was in the store. What did the store employees tell you about how they came to understand what was happening at the place where they work?
Well, it's one of those things where if you're at work, you expect to hear some noise. And the gentleman I talked to who worked in the deli said he heard the boom at first, didn't think anything of it. It was the motion afterwards when he saw people running and getting down on the ground, that's when he realized something was up and that he had to get to some place to hide as well. So he went and hid somewhere. He didn't really clarify where that was, but he says in the moment he heard a voice. He wasn't going to go anywhere, but then he realized it was the voice of his manager. His manager said it's time to get out of here, and he led his employee out, and they ran outside of the building. They saw the first officers as they were starting to arrive here on scene. The other,
did he say to you whether they came back out the front or whether they were able to leave someplace else?
Clarify where they came from, but you know, like if you've ever been inside, I've done a few stories at King Soopers before. You'll be surprised how much exists inside that building that you don't, as a customer, see. You know, we hear people talking about going upstairs. You look at that building, you think, it doesn't look like it has a second floor, but there is an area where employees tend to hang out, where the time clock is and where they can go on breaks.
Your back of house, everywhere that the employees know that the customers wouldn't know, and in a situation of danger would never go or think to go unless they were directed to go there by employees.
Frankly, it's a smart move for those people to get up there, because you think about somebody coming into this building may not know that as well. So it sounds like that some of these employees were able to get people upstairs to these hiding places and keep them safe. Stephen McHugh, who we talked to earlier, his grandchildren were inside the building at the time with his son-in-law, who was here getting his COVID vaccine, says that after the shooting started, someone got them upstairs. They were hiding in a closet, basically, upstairs, when police eventually were able to get them out through the roof, which just sounds incredible. that police were able to mount that kind of response and find people who were hiding in different parts inside the store. But like you and I were talking, you don't think about a grocery store that way as a customer. You don't think about the different places that are inside a building like this where you could go and potentially get safe in a situation like this.
Mm-hmm. And I think I heard you talking earlier today with some of our other colleagues that as police are searching in the store, one, for additional threats, two, people who need urgent medical attention, and then three, just people who could be sheltering somewhere, they would have no way of knowing offhand how many people are in that store. I mean, I'm sure it's a number that King Soopers could get you, could look at some video, could get you a number. But in an urgent situation, those initial law enforcement officers, even after they believe that they've neutralized the threat, are still kind of flying blind for a while.
I've done some kind of odd reporting about how King Soopers manages Boulder. We're just hearing that Boulder police say that the shelter in place at 17th and Grove has been lifted, so we should get that information.
So that gels with what we heard Arnold Brennan say earlier, which is that they had pulled back from that neighborhood, they had pulled up the police tape and so on and so forth. But there's your official word from Boulder police that they're no longer concerned about a secondary situation at 17th and Grove. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
But we were talking about the ability to know who's inside the store, and I've done some reporting. It's an odd story, but King Soopers actually has a system, sensors up above in the rafters where they actually could tell the flow of traffic throughout their store. And that's how, if you've ever been in a King Soopers checkout line, you may have seen the screen with all the numbers on it that shows, this is how many lanes we need now, this is how many we'll need in 30 minutes. That system is able to tell who's inside the store. I don't know if they can tell you exactly how many numbers there are, but at least maybe back at corporate they could go to the police and say there were this many people inside at the time.
It looks like law enforcement might have brought one more vehicle up by the front of the store. I'll step out of the way so that photojournalist Chris Hansen can give us a better look. Chris, it appears to me like that black SUV is a new vehicle, because I think I would have seen it back there. I guess the other possibility is it just turned on its lights, and I'm not bright enough to know if a vehicle's there unless it's got lights on it. But clearly now we've got more law enforcement moving in and out of the store. Oh, that might just be somebody moving a long gun. Yeah, we've got a police officer who I think might have just is moving a rifle from one vehicle to another. Boy, I tell you what, Boulder police are going to give us the information here in a few minutes, any moment now. But a discouraging thing for anybody who has observed over the years the rituals and protocols around the loss of a law enforcement officer is familiar with what a lineup of vehicles means long after an event is over. And, you hope and pray that that's not what happened here today. But the fact is, hours later, you have law enforcement from around the metro area that remains queued up in line outside of the King Soopers here in Boulder. And it is the type of lineup that you would see in a procession for a line of duty death. No such announcement has been made by Boulder Police or any other law enforcement agency, but it is simply an unusual sight that I have only seen in those situations. The silent line of cars waiting for hours with their lights on, and all kinds of different agencies represented there hours after the immediate danger inside has passed. We know that Boulder Police had initially told folks in the community that there was some misinformation floating around out there that they wanted to clear up, and they expected to do that at a 5:45 briefing for the community. That got pushed back a bit. At last check, they thought they were going to try to do it at 6:30. And we're just standing by. We'll stay with you until the point that they're ready to brief the public and presumably take some questions about what happened here today. And that is going to be happening away from our position over on the far side. We've got a separate 9 News crew that's there and waiting to talk to folks. There may have been, as we wait to find out from police how many people were inside the store at the time of the shooting, to give you some idea, there were 4 large transit buses, by my count, that they had lined up in order to take people away. Now, interesting fact of the pandemic is that they don't run transit buses full anymore. They tend to space people out. I don't know if you do that in an emergency situation like this or whether they just put people in every seat, but they had 4 buses there, 3 of them left. And there's one bus that's still waiting over there. And we know that some of the folks who are inside the store were headed to those buses to then go to a safe place where they could not only receive the care that they need and the support that they need, but investigators would also have the opportunity to talk with them. If you're just joining us, within the last 15 to 20 minutes, investigators have gone back in the front door of the King Soopers in Boulder at Table Mesa and Broadway, where a shooting happened this afternoon. The first reports coming in shortly after 2:40. And Boulder police warned the community that the threat from the shooter was still active as they were responding to the location. And you had people streaming out of that store in every direction here into this parking lot on the south side of town. And then you had police massing in great number, dozens of officers outside, and eventually going in the front of the building. Also going up with a cherry picker of sorts to put some folks on the roof. Good number of folks on the roof, at least a half dozen at one point, and a few of them are still up there walking around. But as we learned through a conversation that our Steve Stager had with a gentleman whose family was in the store, that's one way that they got people out, is they got them up and out through the roof. And imagine that a number of the people who were able to get out from inside the building did so by a variety of different exits that, especially if they're shoppers, wouldn't have even known existed when they walked in the store today, because of the fact that the violent threat was right at the front door, that the shooting happened directly outside the store and directly in the front entrance. You've got that kind of entrance area where there's doors on each side, and then right up the middle. Right up the middle is also where there was what appeared to be a civilian vehicle parked on the sidewalk in some of the initial pictures that we saw. Now, can't rule out the fact that that could have been an unmarked vehicle or a first responder coming in a private car and just throwing it on the sidewalk when they got there. But it was just an unusual sight to see right in that area where we knew that the shooting happened, that you had this vehicle kind of up on the sidewalk. So within the last 15 to 20 minutes, you had investigators go into the front of the store again. First time we've seen anybody go in since the shooting. And they had the boot coverings on to protect the scene. Steve wants me to take a look at something. Oh, they're moving a SWAT vehicle back around the side of the building. Which this is the first time that we have seen any kind of equipment like that moved in the last couple of hours. Everything else has been moving out. They may just be coming to pick up some friends for all we know, because you've got the last kind of cadre of law enforcement there on this side of the parking lot. When I arrived here a couple of hours ago, there were 10 to 20 officers in that general area, and now there's maybe 5 or 6 people left there. So it's possible that they're just getting back together to head out. This area still remains shut down to the public. The parking lot, the nearby streets. Broadway was down to one lane when I came in a couple hours ago. Table Mesa is still completely closed, because Table Mesa is where you have probably 20 or better law enforcement vehicles silently queued up, lights on, waiting. Folks from a number of different agencies. Boulder police are starting their briefing. Let's listen in.
Thanks.
It's Commander.
Okay,
and it's
starting.
KERRYYAMAGUCHI. And then we're going to have District Attorney Michael Doherty.
Thank you.
MICHAEL DOUGHERTY. And then we're going to have Kelly McGannon from King Soopers speak. It's KELLYMCGANNON. After they speak, we will take a few questions. But please understand we're in the very early stages of a very large investigation that is going to take some time. So we will not be able to answer a lot of your questions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Commander Kerry Yamaguchi from the Boulder Police Department.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me okay? As Dion shared, we had a very tragic incident today here at the King Soopers. There was loss of life. We have multiple people who were killed in this incident. And I am sorry to have to report that one of them was a Boulder police officer. During this trying time, I would ask the media and the public to honor the privacy of the officer's family and his co-workers here at the police department. I will also share that we got tremendous support from our fellow law enforcement agencies, both in Boulder County, which some of them you see behind me, the FBI, ATF, and other Denver metro agencies. Without that quick response, we don't know if there would have been more loss of life. I can share with the public today, or this evening, that there is no ongoing public threat, that we do have a person of interest in custody. That person was injured during the incident and is being treated for the injuries.
Good evening. My name is Michael Doherty. I'm the District Attorney for Boulder County. This is a tragedy and a nightmare for Boulder County, and in response we have cooperation and assistance from local, state, and federal authorities. This will very much be a coordinated effort, and we will stand united in support of the victims and their families to ensure that justice is done. It's a very early stage in the investigation, as you've heard, and we have a lot of work to do, but we'll be giving out more information as that becomes available and as we nail down the facts here. As Commander Yamaguchi said, there is an individual in custody currently with multiple victims, and we'll be doing everything we can to fight for them and their families to make sure that we reach the right and just outcome. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Kelly McGannon, spokesperson for King Soopers. Our hearts are broken over this senseless act of violence. The entire King Soopers family offers our thoughts, prayers, and support to our associates, our customers, and first responders who so bravely responded to these acts of violence. We're working in full cooperation with local law enforcement and will be deferring all questions to them for the integrity of the investigation. Thank you.
Take a few questions.
Commander, can you tell us what happened?
So, as has already been mentioned, we're very early in the investigation. As Dion shared, that we responded here, officers were here within minutes of the initial 911 calls and entered the building very quickly.
Do you know any possible motive for this?
Very early in the investigation, we don't have any details that I can share at this point. There will be additional information released as it's gathered and it's appropriate to release, but that will come from the Boulder Police Department.
How many have confirmed the number of deaths, sir? Can you confirm the number of deaths?
When did the call come in?
Just before 3 o'clock.
Just before 3 o'clock today.
Can you tell us how many people have died?
We're very early in the investigation. We are still processing the scene.
Do you know if the shooter said anything as the shooter entered the building?
That will be part of the investigation.
What happened on 17th Street?
That was unrelated, we believe, to this incident.
Is there only one shooter?
We're still investigating.
Are there injuries in addition to those who were killed?
Were there injuries in addition to those who were killed?
So at this point, the only injured party we are aware of significant injury was the suspect. We know of no other serious injuries at this point.
Can you tell us about the suspect?
No.
Can you tell us if there was any relationship between the gunman and the people that were shot?
That will be part of the investigation.
When you say multiple fatalities, can you tell us how many?
No, we don't know. They're still processing the scene.
Do you know how many people were in the sewer at the time?
Don't know.
How many in the hospital? Multiple people in the hospital?
Don't know how many are at the hospital currently. I know for sure there is one.
Commander, was there video of the video cameras that might have taped what happened?
That's all going to be part of the investigation.
Does this man have any connection at all to King Soopers or any of the workers?
I'm not aware of that. I don't know. That's part of the investigation.
Was your first call of a man and an active shooter in the parking lot, then it moved inside?
So I haven't had a chance to review any of those calls, and so I can't tell you in what order things were reported to us.
Was this man wearing military gear?
I'm sorry, I got two questions.
Military style, was he wearing military style gear during this?
Don't know. That'll be part of the investigation.
What about the weapon?
Don't have information on that. As I said, the crime scene folks have just very recently entered the crime scene to start processing.
Is the shirtless guy the person of interest? The shirtless man who was seen taken out in handcuffs and put in an ambulance?
Since I would be speculating of who you're talking about, I can't confirm that.
Commander, not to be critical, but it's been more than 3 hours since you got the call. You can't tell us how many people are dead?
I don't have that information right now.
Does anybody?
That'll be part of the investigation.
Is the suspect at Boulder Community?
So if I could just interject one moment. There's a lot of investigation already underway. A lot of things are being realized as the crime scene's being processed, including the number of victims, which is known to police investigators, but I want to stress that victims' family members are still being notified, so we're being really sensitive to the victims' families. So I appreciate Commander Yamaguchi not giving out more information at this point, but even for the facts of which we're certain, those conversations are going to happen with the families first. Those conversations are now taking place.
You still can't estimate how many victims?
We're going to be talking to the families first and then giving out more information.
I don't see the connection between the two.
Okay. Well, Boulder Police Department's going to be giving out that information. I recognize the need to get the information out as soon as possible. I do. But I also recognize that we have one suspect in custody. We're going to ensure that justice is done. And to do that, we're going to make sure we have the facts certain and understood before we start sharing them with the media and the public. That's going to happen. That's going to happen in the next couple hours.
Can you tell us if he shared a motive with you? You don't have to share the motive, but has he presented why he did what he did?
I do not have any information as to the motive at this point. It's really early in the investigation.
Can you release his identification?
I cannot do that at this point, but I can promise you the Boulder Police Department is going to be releasing more information in the next few hours.
How are families who might have been impacted by this, maybe looking for loved ones, being notified that their family members are okay? Can you tell us that?
So the CU Police Department is helping with family members that may have questions about loved ones, and Chief Joe Kirsten will be able to provide more information for family members to contact the CU Police Department for information.
Is the suspect in custody currently scheduled to appear in court?
So there is a suspect in custody. There's no scheduled court appearances yet.
Have there been any charges that have been filed? Will any charges be filed?
Well, the suspect is being treated medically at the hospital right now. I can promise you that we're going to ensure the right thing happens with this case.
Do you only have one from the Boulder area?
That's all I have at this point, but I appreciate you being here, and we'll be giving out more information. The Boulder Police Department will be in charge of giving out more information. I'm going to ask Chief Joe Kirst, if she will, just to let family members know where they could go for or call in for notifications on possible victims.
If people were in the parking lot or saw something, who should they call to give that statement?
Thank you for that question. If there are witnesses out there who have information, and there were many witnesses to this who are cooperating with the investigation already, but if there are additional witnesses, they should contact the Boulder Police Department. But let me turn it over to Chief Joe Kirst.
So if there was witnesses that saw this event, they can contact 303-441-3333, and that's the main number to the Boulder Police Department.
Say that one more time, then, sir?
Yep, no problem. 303-441-3333, and that's the main number to the Boulder Police Department. If there's family or loved ones that have questions as well, they can contact that main number, and they'll be sent an address in regards to additional information there.
Chief,
Thank you
talk
very
to
much.
us about the courage of your officer. We're told he or she went back in, saved lives by what they did.
And that's all the questions we can take right now. I know we wanted more information, but we don't have any more information we can share at this time. We will continue to post all information that we can on our Twitter, and we will announce the next press conference as soon as we know. More information.
Will there be a process?
We are hoping to have more information to release later this evening, yes.
Will there be a procession for the fallen officer?
John will probably want to know if we should stay on scene or if we should go home.
I will find out and we will let you know.
Okay.
Ma'am, how long will this place lock off?
This area, we will continue to ask everybody to
A Boulder police officer is among those killed in the shooting at the King Soopers on the south side of Boulder today. Police not yet saying how many people were killed today, but there were a number of them. A suspect is in custody, and first responders' vehicles are now queuing, presumably, for the procession for the fallen law enforcement officer. Our coverage continues on 9news.com, our social media channels, and on Channel 20 at 9 o'clock.
Thank you.